If you're finding that your wood projects are kind of turning out a little lackluster, a little dull, like they don't have that beautiful wood grain character, I'm going to share a technique with you today that you are going to absolutely love. It's going to totally change that. Hi, I'm Claire, and today I'm going to share a method with you on how you can take wood like this. This is inexpensive pine, and we're going to turn it into this. Look at all of that texture and character and the grain pattern. I'm going to show you how. Let's go. I recently used this technique on faux wood beams I installed in my mudroom, and I was so pleased with how it turned out. As you can see from this bench project of mine, choosing the right stain can be so difficult, especially when dealing with wood species that tend to have orange undertones. And it can be even more difficult if your project contains multiple pieces of wood from different wood types. Over the years, I have definitely struggled with this more times than I can count and trying out numerous stain combinations. So what I figured out was staining cheap wood is really tricky, and I was kind of done with sanding it off numerous times just to try again and maybe not get it correct. What I did find what worked was to use a paint wash and stain combination. The only problem with this method is that sometimes it takes away some of that natural grain and it can look a little flat. So enter in this technique of raising the grain to solve that problem. For this method, using a cheaper wood like pine works really well because the wood is softer, allowing for easy removal between the grain, which in turn allows the grain to pop. And the smaller imperfections and knots in the wood doesn't really matter here, which allows you to choose a lower quality grade like knotty pine. I'm still very selective of the boards that I choose, but I'm concentrating on whether or not they are straight, not bowed or warped, and less worried about the front face condition of the board. To create this popped grain effect, I used a wire brush that attached to my drill. I actually tested out 2 different brushes and practiced on scrap material first. I definitely recommend practicing on some scraps to get a feel for the brushes. This is a 3-inch brush, and bigger definitely didn't mean better in this scenario. It removes some of the softer grain, but I found the smaller brush did a better job and was easier to control. Once I had the brush attached to my drill, I ran it back and forth in the direction of the grain. I'm holding the wire brush at a slight angle so that just the tips of the bristles catch the surface. You don't want to press the brush straight down. Angling it helps the bristles get into those softer parts of the grain and then gently carves them out. During this part, you'll notice the drill wants to pull or twist away from you as the wire brush spins. You're kind of fighting against the rotation. So using 2 hands gives you much more control and helps you keep a steady pressure. The wire brush will definitely leave behind groove marks like this, and that's totally normal. The goal is to keep moving the brush back and forth along the grain, removing the softer parts of the wood as you go. This works because wood is made up of early wood and late wood. Early wood forms in the spring and is softer, while late wood forms later in the year and is denser. The wire brush wears away that softer early wood and it leaves the harder late wood behind. That creates that beautiful raised grain texture and really brings the pattern to life. Once I was done with the wire brushing, I went in with my palm sander using an 80 grit sandpaper. This helps to smooth out some of those heavier groove marks from the brush, but it also continues to remove bits of that remaining softer early wood. I didn't sand it perfectly smooth though. I actually left some of those marks in on purpose because once it was stained, they added amazing definition and texture to the wood. I tested all of this first on my scrap pieces, which I highly recommend. It gave me a chance to play around with the sanding and staining technique ahead of time so I could figure out exactly how much texture I wanted to leave exposed. From here, it's just repeating that same process for each of your project pieces, using the wire brush to bring out the grain, sanding with the 80 grit sandpaper to smooth and refine, and then wiping off the sawdust and getting it ready for paint and stain. A couple things to keep in mind about this process. It's tough on your hands, so definitely take breaks when you need to. It's messy, like sawdust everywhere kind of messy. Make sure you're wearing a dust mask and eye protection. This stuff gets everywhere. I actually used a leaf blower to clear off the heavy dust first and then went in with a rag to wipe it down before finishing. Once the boards are detailed with the raised grain, then stain can be applied. Because these are inexpensive pine boards, there are very prominent orange undertones. So in these situations, I now prefer to do a paint and stain combo. And this is why I'm not too worried if there are a few imperfections in the wood, as my method allows for the opportunity to fix them with wood filler if needed. You can see how the knots disappear here. You can make them as visible or less visible as you like, depending on how much you water down the paint and how much sanding you do in between coats. This method consists of a two-step paint and then a two-step stain technique, which actually makes it sound way more complicated than it is. It's a simple process of doing a paint wash, then highlighting the grain with a lighter color, and then completing the finish with a gel stain and a final coat of regular stain. If you're interested in a detailed step-by-step of this paint stain technique, I'll link a video tutorial down below where I go into much more detail. But here is a close-up of all of those stages: the base paint, the highlight paint, the gel stain, and then a final stain application. I'm honestly so in love with how this turned out. It adds so much texture, warmth, and character, and now I have like a whole list of future projects I want to try this technique on. When I shared a before and after of this project, someone actually accused me of swapping out the budget pine boards for expensive oak, and honestly, if that's not a testament to how good this technique is, I don't know what is. If you're interested in how I built the Shiplap ceiling or the faux beams, I've linked those tutorials for you down below in the description. And if you found this helpful or inspiring, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks so much for watching.